power of these large language models that the big tech companies or these, call them, large upstarts are now really kind of driving forward. Obviously, we think there's tremendous value in leveraging what's being built by these large LLM players. That said, how do we create a moat? Like, what is it that we're doing that's different that allows us to continuously build and innovate, not only on top of those LLMs, but creating a unique data set, providing more proprietary value based on what we're learning from the customers that we work with, and that's where I think there's a differentiated value, right? So currently, all these models are relatively generic. They have a tremendous amount of information. The way you prompt them, prompt and hope sometimes, you get responses, right? And like that's something where we think about the idea of building on top of the large language models as a way to create scale.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Kal Amin, who has been an entrepreneur. He started his career at AOL during the blow up. He worked at Google for many years. Flipboard, Spotify, Sonder, has quite the pedigree. Kal is currently at 1848 Ventures, which is a venture studio focused on building new companies. And specifically, they focus on building companies for the SMB space. SMBs are something that I've personally been more and more interested in. We have this silver tsunami coming where there's this transfer of small businesses and medium businesses to the next generation, whether that's internal family or to someone else. And so the timing of AI as well as this transfer is something that 1848 is focused on. And I was really interested to pick Kal's brain on how they're thinking about the environment and then also AI impacting what technology needs to be built. They particularly focus in just building startups and incubating them in-house in this venture studio model for that space. And so we have a very interesting conversation about what that means, what that looks like, what the ideal founder looks like, how do you even have defensibility and a moat in this world where you can basically take a screenshot and say, AI, please replicate this, and a lot more. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too, and I'll catch you in the next one. Kal, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elijah.
Let's just get the first thing out of the way. Define SMB for me, because there's kind of varying different definitions from 1848's venture perspective. What is an SMB?
Yeah, the way we think about SMBs, they're obviously small to medium-sized businesses. There's 33 million of them in the United States. They represent 44% of the US GDP, over 80% of job creation. And for us, it's really about those customers or segments where we believe there's an opportunity for 1848 to provide a solution to help them be more productive, to be more efficient, and ultimately to help them do their jobs better. That's high level what we would think about SMBs.
And so particularly, I get the value proposition of targeting SMBs, trying to work with them and help bring technology to them. Why hasn't this been done before? Is it a particular gap? Are other people doing it, or why you guys specifically?
Yeah, I think given the acceleration of what's happening within the space of AI, we're seeing more and more venture firms spend time with these markets or these segments. I think historically the cost or the unit economics of really supporting small to medium-sized businesses didn't really fit the venture model. But given the acceleration of AI and the opportunity it now presents creates more value for ventures to really spend in these segments. So we are seeing more and more firms really starting to take a look at SMBs as an opportunity. But historically, just the cost, the cost didn't really match the value. And we're seeing that really shift given the fact that AI is becoming much more of an opportunity to create solutions that can scale for the SMB community.
Yeah, this is something I've thought a lot about too, because obviously AI is the topic du jour, but there's a reason for it, right? It's driving real results, real time for less cost. And so, taking it to an SMB or any business that's already established, right? There's kind of these two buckets. There's a startup, right? Brand new startup from scratch, and you're trying to build a product, you're trying to find product market fit and all of these things. Efficiency of you doing that doesn't matter as much, right? If you're more efficient at some type of workflow within your operations, that's good, but it doesn't really drive the needle. What you really need is your first customer or investor capital or these other things. But if you're an established business, right, if you're already up and running and you've been around for a while, and being able to take something that you do and make it more efficient through leverage, which is typically technology or capital or something else, but technology and AI in this instance, That's a very interesting ability to kind of drive and force that value within an existing company.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, we kind of see both ends of this, right? So as we build, through our innovation engine, our incubator model, we build companies. Our goal there is to obviously drive that first customer. So we totally understand that very well. But as we're building these products and solutions, the way we think about supporting the small to medium sized business market or segment really is, how do we help them? First of all, we start by understanding, is there a real problem to solve? Right? Is there a problem that the customer or the end user sees that we want to continue to invest in? Is it a problem that they're willing to pay for? And ultimately, will it be something that makes them either more productive or more efficient, ultimately leading to a healthier bottom line? And that is really the intent of when you have a business that's structured, you have a business that's already up and running. How do you make it more efficient? How do you make it more profitable? And I think companies like the ones that we build through 1848 Ventures can really support that. And we see that through a couple of our existing ventures. I'll mention TakeUp.ai, which is our travel and hospitality venture. We focus on bed and breakfast, outdoor hospitality.
And can you, if you don't mind, just talk me through the entire process, whether it's this company that you're talking about or another one that you guys have created. Like, how do you go from, okay, let's target this segment and build this product, and here's the niche, and it's, this is the cap and the focus from a SMB perspective, just soup to nuts.
Yeah, well, maybe to take a step back, Elijah, it's 1848 Ventures is a corporate venture studio. We are backed by Westfield Insurance out of Ohio. What we do is our mandate is really to focus on building AI-enabled solutions for the small and medium-sized market. We don't build insurance tech. We build companies that really support these small to medium-sized business, and it's multi-industry. We're also looking at a few horizontal opportunities. But we've launched so far, we have 2 active ventures. One is in the travel hospitality space, and that's TakeUp.ai, as I just mentioned. The other is in e-commerce, and that is called Vondra.ai. We have a third that is in a soft launch in construction tech. And we have more that are coming this year. The goal of what we do is we start with research. So we look at, industry research. We try to identify pain points or gaps that we see within the markets around specific industries, some of which I just mentioned. And then from there, we conduct a set of customer interviews. We meet with individuals, companies, customers in those specific sectors or industries, understanding if what we've uncovered from the research side truly is a problem that we see within the market. We then start to, in addition to those customer interviews, we start to really pull together prototypes of products and services that can support that customer or that industry. And we create a validation process. We go through to validate if the problem is truly something that can scale, and is there enough of a market for us to really build a business around that specific problem or that specific product. If we feel that there is, we then create a small team that goes out and really builds the platform or the company, including the products and services for the customer, ultimately leading to us, getting into a pre-seed mode, funding the company, driving the first, call it 50 to 100 customers, and then from there, scaling it out to a seed investment as an organization. So TakeUp is one of the companies that I mentioned, went through that entire process. The founders of that company spent quite a bit of time, at the bed and breakfast that they first onboarded, really learning more about their business. And then from there, building a price optimization tool that is now AI enabled or AI powered to help to drive, value from a customer standpoint for those vacancies or for those rooms, so creating the right price points to then be able to, have those rooms occupied. What we're seeing is that we're having a huge positive impact on these small to medium-sized businesses. And in the case of TakeUp, we just had one of our customers share with us that because of TakeUp, they were able to build 2 extra rooms at their bed and breakfast, which obviously increases the value of their entire property. So we think that's where the value is created when we find a problem that we can solve. It's a problem that typically has been either ignored or has been underserved by larger tech companies. And we have an opportunity to really find that niche where we can play.
I think venture studios are a very interesting piece of the overall landscape. So we have, traditional startups, right? It's, I have an idea. I'm going to go build a company. I'm going to get fundraising, and ideally I go change the world, right? And then there's the other side, which is the, venture capitalist, which is I'm looking for people that I can invest in that are building companies that are hopefully going to give me a really good return, go change the world. And then you have kind of big corporations that can build technology in-house or any business that can build technology in-house, but it's it's exclusive to them. And then you have this kind of middle area of the venture studio, which is you have your, corporate sponsor, you have your funding, and then you also have a team, right? It's not just here's two founders working in their garage trying to change the world, but it's here's this team that has experience. You have background from Spotify, from Sonder, from Flipboard, but you've been through this journey multiple times over, and you're aware of kind of what goes into it. And then the entire team has a lot of experience. So to incubate almost based on the experts, and then to what's your process for finding founders? You plug in founders. So it's interesting to see kind of how the landscape shifts.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like right now for Venture Studio works? Like has Venture Studio always worked in the past, but no one's really caught on to it now? Or is there something more specific about the timing, AI, technology, capital that's making Venture Studios more and more effective today?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we view this as the perfect time to have a venture studio model. And that is because, again, back to the acceleration of technology that we're seeing like through AI, Gen AI, it gives us a chance to build quickly, right? The idea of experimenting, launching companies, understanding, not even launching companies, prototyping and building products and services that we can bring to market relatively quickly, understand if they are truly scalable, and then if they are, putting the right teams together then to further advance that opportunity. So I think technology plays a big part of it. Having the capital and having a very stable kind of, backing also is an important part of our journey.
You can probably take different risks and different, opportunities, right? Whereas a founder needs to get ramen profitable or go fundraise fast if they're going to try to do this. You guys are able to have different, more resources so you can take longer to evaluate an opportunity before dipping your toes in. Yeah.
Yeah, we do try to operate lean, but that is true. We get a chance to experiment. It's been a big focus for us since I've joined. So I've been with 1848 Ventures for just about 10 months now. And
how old is the organization? Overall?
It's 6 years old. So it's been around for a while. We launched 3 companies over the first 6 years of 1848 Ventures, of which 2 are still active. The third, we sold the IP right before I joined. We're going to launch 3 this year. So we're going to launch 3 in 2025.
A big step up from two per year to 3. I mean, that's a 50% increase,
so
right?
the goal is to launch 3 this year. And then with that, consistently launch at least 2 every year going forward. But I think that's only possible, 1, because of what the technology that is now available to us. And 2, it's really the team, right? So I think we've got some really strong entrepreneurs that have come in. They've had multiple exits, they've built companies, they've gone from 0 to 1. And we've really created this environment that is truly about urgency, it's about pace, it's about experimentation and learning quickly on what's going to work and what's not going to work. And that's allowed us to really create a new model for our venture studio. The core of what we do through the incubator, which we call our innovation engine, is everything from research, validation, prototyping, first product to market, first set of customers, and then getting into seed investment. And we think that that's really worked for us. The third thing that I think that is important from our perspective is that our investor, going back to Westfield, truly has given us the autonomy that we believe we need to be successful. We still have regular check-ins.
Big important thing.
Yeah, it's really important. And having the board meeting, having the check-ins, we do all of that, but we are not beholden to a specific type of technology or a specific industry. It would have been easy to say, let's go build insurance tech, right? Because we're funded by an insurance organization or a corporation, but that's not what we do. We build across multiple industries. In some cases, we're even building horizontal solutions. But the idea is that with scale, there's strategic value to having the customers that we're onboarding into our ventures be part of an opportunity for the insurance company as well. So it's this idea of really moving from this transfer of risk, which is typically what the insurance corporation is doing, to really this idea of really deepening that relationship with customers outside of that transfer of risk as well.
So I get it from the the SMB piece, right? I get that from an alignment with Westfield. But also, I want to challenge you on it because SMBs are notoriously this class of buyer where it makes sense, right? So they're businesses, they make money. So if you can build something for them that's making them more money, it should be a pretty easy sale. But then I've also talked to many founders where they've attempted to go that way and they either go earlier or they go to consumer or they go to enterprise. And the reason being is, SMBs are no two are alike. And so the decision-making process can be difficult to figure out. Is it who is it? Is it just a family or a spouse team or an individual, but all of them are kind of very strapped in just focusing heads down on just keeping the business going. And so I can't look at new technology and all this fancy AI stuff. So is that true, or is that a misnomer? And then also, is it changing with AI at all?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's changing, right? I think there's a couple of factors at play here. One thing that we talk about internally is what we call this great SMB transfer. We're seeing that, some of the, the data out there showcases the fact that, over 50% of SMB ownership is with a population that's 55 plus. And we're starting to see what we call this generational transfer that's happening, where these businesses are being handed down to a new generation within the family, or there's a new generation of entrepreneurs coming in, individuals who have decided not to take the corporate route, or some individuals who we call corporate refugees, who were in corporations and are now leaving to really purchase these businesses. And with the acceleration of technology, being a younger entrepreneur, they're very digitally savvy. They're also very AI curious, and they want the tools to do the work for them.
Yeah.
And we think
so they get the value. They're digital natives. They
exactly.
Recognize that this is the way.
And that's right. And that is leading to a new set of SMB owners that are very different than I think what I grew up with, right? I think this idea of the manual work, the gut instinct really driving decisions, that's all changed. So this is going back to your initial question of like, are more and more venture firms getting involved? They are, and they're getting involved because these tools are now available to a new class of owners, and these owners want these tools to be available to them. So we think that's an important part of the journey. I think the other part of this is that, it's important that it's not just technology for the sake of technology. What is the problem that we're solving? How can that be incorporated into your process that you've been running, for the, however long you've been owning or running your business? But this idea of really ensuring that it's meeting the, the user or the customer where they are and the work that they need to do. So that's an important part of what we do. And I think the third leg of that stool also ties back to the fact that we look for niche segments that may not be big for traditional VCs who look for those 100x returns. We're comfortable with businesses that generate 50 million, 100 million ARR, and that's perfectly well for us, right? Because that fits into our model. But there are niche segments of customers that are underserved in a lot of the industries that I've mentioned on this call. And really, they're multi-billion-dollar segments that we can play into. So we think finding those niche segments where we can really find scale would be another part of that equation for us as well.
Yeah, I think the timing is you mentioned it. You said it's the great something
SMB transfer. Yeah,
great SMB transfer, the silver tsunami as I know it.
Yeah, yes.
But I have a friend who was also on the podcast actually last year, I think, and he's done this, right? So it's entrepreneurship by acquisition, I think, is the kind of term as well. And so he went out, he got an SBA loan, and he bought his first business, which was a manufacturing, a 70-year-old manufacturing company that manufactures antique car headliners or something to that effect, right? And fast forward a couple years, he's now acquired, I think, 4 or 5 of these small businesses, rolled them up. One was a mom and pop that was doing it for 30 years, selling car parts on eBay. And there's kind of this gap because you mentioned, yes, some people are kind of generationally passing it down, but then others are saying, hey, I have this business, it produces 300K in cash flow per year, but no one wants to take it over. My kids are off doing something else, or I don't have kids. What do I do with this? And so there is this kind of transfer that's happening. So it's interesting to talk about, well, what are the long tail effects of that? If this transfer is happening and it's happening one way or another, the business is going to a younger family member or to, entrepreneurship by acquisition. Well, that's a younger generation that's kind of owning and running these businesses, which brings in a new kind of decision-making process for, well, how do we modernize this business? So let's go look at tools that fit our problem and our needs, a la what you guys are building with your kind of SMB targeted AI and technical companies.
No, you nailed it. That's exactly right. I mean, we are in every single set of customer conversations that we have. when we see that there's a new entrepreneur or a new owner of a company, the first question is usually, well, what technology is available to me or to my business that will allow me to be more efficient, to be more productive, and also just scale, right? Like what is that set of tools or tech stack that I need to run my business? And we're seeing that happen across multiple industries within this SMB environment, and I think we're just going to see more of that. Our prediction is that as we see AI continue to accelerate, it's no longer like this scary thing for an individual. It's no longer a scary a proposition for a business owner. It's really around this idea that we think that every single business will have some level of AI built into their business, either knowingly or unknowingly, right? And we want to be at the forefront of that. How do we help these customers or this market really think about what's available to them, and how do we help them really introduce how do we introduce solutions that can make their lives that much easier? And that's at the individual industry or customer level. We also think about this generational transfer as a very big opportunity for 1848 Ventures as well. How do we help facilitate the buying and selling of these businesses? How do we provide information that is valuable to the buyer? How do we provide data and information that's valuable to the seller? How do we help them increase the value of the business that they're selling? And we think that's a place that we can play as well.
Fascinating, fascinating. One of the pieces I'm curious about as well is AI is talked about a lot, obviously, and with great warrant. I think it's like you said, it's going to be imbued in every aspect of business, and I think personal life as well. Yeah. Just like everyone has a supercomputer in their pocket that has access to the internet, technology is all around us. We're immersed in it. We're steeped in it. It is how we work, at least in the Western and more modern societies. So I do agree with you that AI is going to just become so ingrained in everything that we do. I think one of the difficult things to answer that I've talked with investors about, VCs, investors, angels, et cetera, is how do you know what is actually going to be useful versus not, right? This conversation around, is it just an AI wrapper around ChatGPT? Does it become obsolete in 6 or 12 months because the model gets better? Yeah. So how are you guys approaching yes, you want to create value. Yeah. You want to create differentiated value. But how do you also create differentiated value that is going to stick around and say, okay, well, it makes sense to work with one of your companies right now, but in 6 months, 12 months, 6 years, how do you have that staying power that you're not going to be replaced by, OpenAI releases a new model and now it can do everything and you guys are less necessary? Yeah,
it's a great question. We actually talk about this quite a bit. I think, the power of these large language models that the big tech companies or these, call them, large upstarts are now really kind of driving forward. Obviously, we think there's tremendous value in leveraging what's being built by these large LLM players. That said, how do we create a moat? Like, what is it that we're doing that's different that allows us to continuously build and innovate, not only on top of those LLMs, but creating a unique data set, providing more proprietary value based on what we're learning from the customers that we work with, and that's where I think there's a differentiated value, right? So currently, all these models are relatively generic. They have a tremendous amount of information. The way you prompt them, prompt and hope sometimes, you get responses, right? And that's something where we think about the idea of building on top of the large language models as a way to create scale and continuously, level up as these models are leveling up. But what is the proprietary data that we have? How do we understand that data, the nuances of that data, and create a strategic moat for each of the different industries that we go into? That's where we can provide the most value. I think that, coupled with having a human in the loop who helps really the customer understand how to make value of that information.
And that's human in the loop on your company side, not on the client side.
Yes? For some we do both. But I think number one, it's really on the 1848 side. But then ultimately, if there's a need for us to work with SMB owners or customers, we do provide resources to help support the implementation and the use of that in the early days. So it's almost like this onboarding process that we've introduced for some of our customers, and we think that provides strategic value as well. But the core of this is really around, what is the proprietary data? What is our data strategy that supports that proprietary data? What are we ingesting? What are we creating? What are we generating? And how does that create a better product or a better service for the industries that we are going to be focused on.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this too, and I kind of arrive at the same answer. Correct me if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly, but the value, the lasting value and moat and IP of a company is less about process or technology and more and more and more about what unique data do you have. In this world of, there are foundational models left, right, and center. They all kind of do the same thing more or less, and they're going to keep competing, driving down costs. It's wonderful for the consumer, for the small company building on top of them. But the differentiation is that data piece. Is that kind of the core thesis for 1848?
Yeah, that is part of our core thesis. Like, the idea of understanding the customer pain point, solving the customer's, key needs, obviously, is the way that we interact with the customer. But underlying all of that is a large data set that we think we can build for any industry that we go into. And the more we learn about that customer or that customer segment, the better the product or the service we can build or create, and ultimately innovate on top of as well. So yeah, that is correct.
Going back to your background,
Sure.
What does an ideal entrepreneur look like? I mean, you've gone through, maybe share a little bit about your experience and kind of what you've done, because I think you have quite the impressive pedigree. But that's also in a world where, that's all pre-AI world, right? And so I'm curious about, hearing about your background, but then if you could also bring that forward to today, where 1848 is selecting founders to put into the companies that they're building. What does that founder makeup look like now? Is it changing in terms of what you look for, or is it the same type of grit, tenacity, domain expertise, et cetera, that you looked for previously?
Yeah. So I'll start with my background. Yeah. So I've been in the technology space for 25 years now. It seems like a very long time. I started my career at AOL in the late 90s. I started off in
the OG.
Yeah, like this is when we were onboarding, the U.S. onto the internet back in the late 90s.
AOL, or what was it? AOL Online, USA Online?
Yeah, America Online. Yeah,
America Online.
right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Duh.
Yeah. And we, I started my career in the accounting and finance world at AOL. I actually learned about the advertising business through the lens of finance while at AOL. Moved from Dulles, Virginia to New York with AOL, where I thought I wanted to be in sales, and I was a terrible salesperson back in 2000. But luckily ran into a former colleague from the Netscape days, if you remember Netscape. It was one of the original browsers. And, this colleague of mine said to me, like, hey, I've just joined this new company called Google. And I think somebody with your background and skill set would be a great fit for us as we were building out reporting and pipeline management, all these tools that just didn't exist. So I was hired as, I believe, if not the first, one of the first business analysts at Google on the advertising side of the business. My job was to build out all of our sales reporting, pipeline reporting. It was really part of the founding advertising team. Spent almost a decade at Google, where I kind of not only worked within the advertising organization, I worked on compliance efforts before we went public. I ran a team that was focused on really developing other markets around the world based on some of the best practices that we had built out in the US. But the idea was really to help scale the advertising and monetization side of that business. From there, I went back to AOL for the turnaround, and I joined a few colleagues, including the CEO at the time, Tim Armstrong.
Did it turn around?
Well, they sold for $5 billion to Verizon, so you can do that how you will. But yeah, it was a turnaround journey for sure, and was there for a little over 2.5 years for the turnaround, and then joined Spotify very early when they came to the United States. Was probably one of the top 30 or 40 employees when they first started in the United States. Started off in a sales strategy and operations role that grew into more of a global business operations role, where my team was responsible for not only for sales and monetization, but also launching new markets around the world, working very closely with Daniel and his leadership team to help create a scalable kind of operation for the organization because we were growing so quickly. I was the president and COO of Flipboard as another part of my turnaround experience. And then started a company.
Side note, I distinctly remember Flipboard coming out, very early in the App Store.
Yeah.
I feel like it was maybe one of the first beautiful experiences
really
of the App Store.
Yes.
And so I don't know, it's fun to kind of see that name pop up because I haven't thought about Flipboard in so long, but it really was quite iconic. And even today, I feel like if you went back into the app, which I'm sure is still around, but if you went back, it's still certain experiences and certain interactions stick around and have staying power for being a good UX. Other ones fade and just don't make
Yeah.
sense. And I feel like Flipboard really understood about how to marry consumption with also engaging experience. That's, it's not doom scrolling. It was kind of this dynamic, animated, beautiful news consumption platform.
No, yeah. If you use Flipboard on the iPad today or on your mobile device, the user experience still is, one to none. I mean, I think they've done a great job with the user experience. I know Mike McHugh, who's one of the founders of Flipboard, really focused on that in the early days and continues to focus on that. So yeah, I think you're right, and it is still a very unique experience compared to your point, just like folks doom scrolling through some of the other social apps. But you really get a more engaging environment within Flipboard. So I was there for, I think, is it 18 months? And while I was there, one of my co-founders from my most recent startup, by the name of Dan Daugherty, Dan and I worked together at Google a long time ago, and he had reached out and he said, "Hey, I'm getting into the audio business. I'm thinking about launching this company. Can you take a look at my pitch deck?" And I took a look at the pitch deck. I thought it was interesting enough that I invested just a small amount of capital into the pre-seed round. I ended up spending more and more time with Dan, introduced him to my network that I had made through my career, especially during my time at Spotify. And this is when podcasting was just like really, like just exploding. And Dan said, he's like, "Look, you kind of have the network." He was based in Colorado. I was in New York at the time. And so why don't you just join? Like, do you want to join as my co-founder and CEO? And, I had to pick and choose between this experience that I was gaining at Flipboard, which I loved, and also this opportunity to build something from the ground up again. And I chose to build something from the ground up and joined Dan on that journey and did that for 5 years. We exited the business to Triton Media, part of iHeartMedia. And then, joined 1848 10 months ago, and that's the quick and dirty version.
Quite the pedigree and tenured entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah. Like it's been a fun ride, and what I love about my experience and the way that it helps me at 1848, especially in the model we're in today, I'm getting a chance to leverage that 25 years worth of experience as we think about shaping the entire organization, from our culture, the way we hire, the type of organization we want to be as we continue to scale, but also within the ventures themselves, right? The idea of taking all of the learnings and parallels that I've experienced throughout my career and being able to apply that to the startups that we're building. And I think, I hope it's a value. I think it's a value. I think the team sees it as a value. And, we've been able to now think about really scaling into launching, like I said, 3 ventures this year and consistently launching at least 2 every year after that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So given the 25 years of being a founder, early stage at very successful companies, late stages at other companies, the founder trope, right? The founder idea of what it is to be a founder has certain elements that I think have stuck around, right? So a little bit of a maverick, a little bit of, I have the hubris to believe I can change the world, but also the willingness and craziness to go try, sticking to it despite, negative outcomes, et cetera. So there are a lot of these kind of recurring themes and trends that have always existed. And then even if you look at YC, Y Combinator, one of the most prolific venture, incubators in the world, they have kind of the thesis of, the best companies or the most successful companies have 3 co-founders. There's the person who can build, so that's product and engineering. There's the person who can sell, so marketing and sales. And the person who keeps everyone out of jail, which is the CEO, operations, kind of making sure you have insurance, you kind of pay the bills, et cetera. Right. And so like those companies, and particularly those 3 roles, have always been the ideal makeup, and maybe you have multiple hats and all this kind of stuff. But that's kind of been the tried and true, perfect, ideal outline for founders. Fast forward to today, we have the ability to type anything into a chatbot, and it can generate code, right? And there's varying degrees of Lovable and Windsurf and Cursor and these tools out there, but we're trending more and more towards code being almost a commodity. And so I wonder, is there something that the founder profile looks different than it did before, or the founding team profile looks different, or is it still just kind of core traits and characteristics that make up a person to be good as a founder or bad as a founder?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. And what I mean by that is, I think some of the traits that you mentioned earlier, I think those really are like the same or similar traits that we look for. Do they have grit and resilience? Are they willing to fail? Are they looking to, would they be able to pivot? Do they have an underdog mentality? Have they seen the 0 to 1 story, or have they only been in corporations that potentially don't map to some of the ventures at the earliest stages? Can they build teams? Can they create a culture? Are they willing to go above and beyond for that first customer to really ensure that we're driving the product and the company forward? And I think that is a set of that's a DNA that I think individuals have, and when you find it, you know it, and we've seen that through our hiring process. I think the big shift that we've made, and I would agree with you, Elijah. I think from my perspective, we have very strong product people, we have strong engineers, we have strong data science folks. That's amazing, but in today's world, your point on commodity, that's a question we ask almost every day. The thing that's hard to find, especially at the founder level, is industry expertise, the ability to drive go-to-market, understand how to navigate the bureaucracy or the underpinnings of some of these industries, and finding those individuals is what we look for. So, having all those traits that we mentioned, can they kind of persevere through all the challenges that are inherent or built into a early stage startup? Because it isn't a straight line, right? It isn't linear. You have these peaks and valleys, and you have to work through that. So from that perspective, you need to find individuals who can just really, again, persevere. That said, do they understand the industry? Do they have I'm using an archaic term, do they have a Rolodex of customers or relationships that can help them navigate and build that network for that specific venture? And ultimately, can they build a go-to-market strategy? And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of differentiation. There's going to be many products, especially naming some of the companies you just named, that can create websites and apps relatively easily and quickly. But how do you really build a business, right?
Yeah.
That's the part that I think is going to be the huge differentiator as we think about this point forward. You could have a whole set of agents working for you, but if you don't know how to build a business, I think it's going to be really challenging for you.
I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about is maybe not even an idea, but many people have come to me and said, "Oh, I have an idea for an app. If you build it for me, I'll give you, 10% equity. It's going to be $1 billion. It's going to be so great." And, the reality is that often those people just haven't been in the startup world. They don't understand what building a business is versus building a product. And I think with these tools that are democratizing coding, right, and being able to build software, it's going to be very eye-opening for anyone to be able to go and actually build their prototype now. And then they realize, oh shit, it's actually a lot harder than I thought to build the business. But that's a good thing, because that means they're going to fail, and then they're going to learn, and they'll try again, and maybe they'll fail or learn something new. It removes almost excuses of saying, well, I don't know how to code and I don't have money, so I can't try. Well, you don't need money anymore, and you don't necessarily need to know how to code. You can go try, and you still will probably fail, but failing is not this bad thing. It just is going to bring more entrepreneurship. It's going to be more people are going to think creatively. There are fewer constraints than ever to build something, and even if you do need capital, you probably need less than you did before. So I'm really excited about kind of this world we live in. And to your point, building a product does not mean you're building a business. And so that makes a lot of sense to look for founders that have the capability to build a business, to figure out their go-to-market strategy, to get customers, to tap on their 5, 10, 15, 20 years of prior relationships and industry expertise to actually get sales and get the thing going.
Yeah, no. And the other thing, you mentioned earlier, like the founding teams or what the organization looks like or where these founders come from, we are in complete experimentation mode, which means we're trying many different ways to do this. And in some cases, we've actually taken some of those leaders who have been in the incubation space and brought them forward to then go run the company, right?
What does that mean?
So taking a venture leader or somebody who has been through the incubation process, prototyping the idea, helping us
in at 1848, you're saying?
Within 1848, we've taken individuals from our incubator space and actually then made them CEOs or CTOs of the ventures that have launched. And in other cases, we've brought in leaders from, external folks who we've brought in to really run these companies. And it all depends on how a venture is progressing, the type of expertise we have in-house, or type of expertise we need to go find, right? So there isn't a cookie cutter model here. And I think that's the other part that maybe some other venture studios or firms kind of rely on. We don't do that. As it is with a startup, which has, many different ways to get to the final destination, there's no cookie cutter answer to finding the right founding team from our perspective. Do we like to see it carry from the initial stages of an idea all the way through? Sure, if it makes sense. But in other cases, if we can find a strong leader that has, again, that industry expertise, has the knowledge, has the ability to really navigate those waters, we'll go find that individual as well. So we think it's important to really just experiment and find what works best for that specific idea or for that specific startup.
Kal, this has been super cool to kind of pick into your mind and understand how venture studios are changing. I'm curious to see what you guys ship and launch over the next 12 months. So I'll be watching. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.